produced as part of a digital exhibition exploring how liberal Judaism has evolved since it was co-founded by British visionary Lily Montagu in 1902. This episode explores the theme of family background and finding liberal Judaism. In this series, you will hear the voices of liberal Jews as they share their experiences, views and visions. The first episode explores participants' family background and how they encountered liberal Judaism. It includes some of the stories about where they came from and the personal appeal of liberal Judaism. As you will hear, liberal Jews come from many places. Some are refugees or immigrants. Some are born into liberal Jewish families. Others are Jews by choice. All are united in finding a home within liberal Judaism. Following Lily Montagu's personal legacy, they all contribute to liberal Judaism's rich and varied heritage.
Well, you're interviewing me as you know me as Joanna Kessler. But when I was born in Vienna on the 20th of August 1929. My name was Inga Johanna Rubner, and that was the name that I was known by until I was 16. I grew up in Vienna in quite a nice flat in what was known as the third Bezirk, the third district. My father was a civil engineer. He had a good job. My mother had been ill all her life. She suffered from TB. She spent a lot of time in hospital. I was brought up to a large extent by my grandmother, my mother's mother. When I was 6 years old, I went to school. This was the local school, just up the road, which would have been 1935. And all was well at the school until Hitler came, and all the Jewish children were made to go to separate schools, to Jewish schools. And a little sort of cohort of parents used to accompany us. But in the end, those groups were attacked, so we stopped going to school. My father began to think of possibly coming to England. My uncle was a banker, quite a well-known banker in Vienna, and had a connection with the Westminster Bank in England. When my cousins came to England, finally, they also set about getting visas for the rest of the family. And one of those visas I got to come to England. Now, how was I going to get there? Nobody else had a visa. And my father advertised me in the Jewish Chronicle. And he got several replies. But he finally accepted an offer from a Jewish family in London, a doctor's family. This family was a part of the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. And the Liberal Jewish Synagogue at that time had a chairman, Lily Montagu. She was the chairman. She realized what was happening on the continent. She called a meeting and she said, "We must help." Several families came forward, and in fact the Liberal Jewish Synagogue made it possible for 3 children to come to England. I came from Vienna, another one came from, I think, Germany, and I'm not quite sure where the third one came from. But anyway, the date finally came, and I was on one of the very first kinder transports leaving from Vienna. I'd thought a lot about it. I was going to take my games, I was going to show off, I was going to sing. I was really rather looking forward to it. But when the time came to say goodbye to my mother, it was really very painful. And my father took me to the station. There were lots of other children there, parents and grandparents. And he handed me over to the girl who was arranging my kinder transport. She was a 19-year-old girl, a Quaker, who had put herself in charge of the 7 children on the kinder transport. And off we went. My cousin was there to meet me and handed me over to my English family. I was unhappy, and then they decided to send me to boarding school. Boarding school was heaven, because if I was unhappy, so were a whole lot of other people. And the boarding school was run by a Quaker lady, and I spent a happy term there. I think My family obviously were members of the Liberal Jewish Synagogue, and the other two families who also paid for me were in fact rabbis of the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. So technically I must have been made a member when I was 9 years old. When I went to boarding school, the Liberal Jewish Synagogue used to send me correspondence so that I could do the religion classes which were being held for children at the synagogue. I think any children at that time evacuated or at boarding schools received these correspondence courses. Apart from that, I didn't really have a link with the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. And in fact, when I went to Swanage, I had to go to church as well, and I got a bit annoyed as having to do Jewish correspondence classes as well as having to go to church. But I went on doing them. And the Liberal Jewish Synagogue at that time did not believe in bar mitzvah. They felt that children were not old enough at age 13 to commit themselves to any religion. That should wait until they were 16. So there were no bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvah at the LJS. But there was a confirmation at 16. And in fact, I came to London when I was 16, and I was there in time for my confirmation, and also for the week before when classes were held for the confirmation service. And so in 1946, I was confirmed at the Liberal Jewish Synagogue, where obviously I continued as a member, but not as a very interested member, I must admit.
I was born in King's College Hospital, Denmark Hill, 90 years ago. And oddly enough, I was there 20 years ago to welcome my granddaughter, who lives in Dulwich. My father, Sam, was born in 1904. He was the oldest of 8 children. He was left an orphan, if you use that word, when his father was 47. He died. And my father was the mainstay for his younger brother and his sisters. An enormous family. And he was very much the boss, because he was a short man, 5'4", but he had a big personality. Unfortunately, he died when he was 67. In the fullness of life, he had a lot to live for, but he died young. My mother, Janie, an innocent, plucked from her virgin life in East London by my father. They weren't exactly the most idyllic couple, the most beautiful couple, but they got on. They survived. We had 2 children. I was the older. My brother, Malcolm, was the younger. And we were a happy family until the war. And then when the war started in 1939, my mother, being a typical Jewish mother, wanted only to get her children out of harm's way. And so we were evacuated out of London. I went to Stevenage in Hertfordshire. I was billeted for the most part with a family called Swain, and I was brought up with them through the war until 1942, when I came back to London. It seemed that the threat of extinction had disappeared. And then in 1944 or thereabouts, the V1s started in London, and my mother, terrified yet again, dispatched me to Cambridgeshire, where I went to live with Rosalind and Trevor in a house called, surprisingly, Ros Trevor in Chatteris in Cambridgeshire. And that started a new chapter of my life, because I then joined Whitechapel Foundation School, which was evacuated there. I came under the influence of a classroom of 15-year-old boys: Altman, Bloomberg, Weinberg, Greenberg, Berenbaum, Gold, as you can gather, they were all Jewish. And this was a church foundation school. However, we were all Jewish boys in a totally non-Jewish environment in Chatteris in Cambridgeshire, and that was where I spent my adolescent years. Loved it. I enjoyed every second of it. Shimmy Rosen, our maths teacher, tried to keep the Jewish boys together with their Judaism. To some extent he succeeded, I suppose, but for the most part it wasn't our sort of Judaism. And so at the end of the war, came back to London, I came back to Stamford Hill. I joined the Stamford Hill Boys Club. I was involved in Jewish life to that extent, but not in synagogue life at all. My mother was traditional, pots and pans Jewish, wanted me to be part of the Jewish community, but going to synagogue on a regular basis, which I never did. And then she gradually conceded that we were never ever going to be a religious family. I was bar mitzvah in Lampard Grove on Stamford Hill at the age of 13. It was a big event. I was a star attraction because I had a lovely voice, even then, still have. So I was a member of the United Synagogue, but reluctant. I didn't like it, didn't want to be in there, and was forced to go to services at High Holy Days by my mother, but I skipped out and went out with my mates, and we went to cafes and whatnot and did all the wrong things. And then I discovered North London Progressive Synagogue. There I found people and a home which I enjoyed. I've been Finchley since 53. When we got married, and Leslie Edgar said, "You're living in Finchley, there's a new community there, would you go and join them?" Which we did. So we've been involved in that synagogue ever since.
I was born in Southampton, 1971. My father is Jewish, my mother is not. My father was brought up Jewish, not strictly Jewish, but he had a bat mitzvah and did the High Holy Days and all of that sort of stuff. He was actually brought up in London, in the West End. I think his bat mitzvah was at the Central Synagogue. So he had quite a sort of Jewish upbringing, not strictly religious, but very much a Jewish upbringing. He actually went to a Jewish boarding school as well, called Whittingham College. But he met my mum at university and he married out. And when they had children, they basically made a decision that they weren't going to raise us. I've got a brother who's 18 months younger than me. They weren't going to raise us as either a Jewish or Christian. It was very much, we'll let them come to their own conclusions. But obviously when you do grow up in the UK, you get the Christianity stuff kind of by default. So I was kind of brought up in a very sort of secular, but with a lot of Christian festivals, simply through virtue of the fact that I grew up in the south of England in the 70s. I don't know exactly when I started becoming interested in the Jewish side of my background, but I kind of think I always was a little bit. We were always aware of it. It was, it was very kind of talked about. And I suppose when I was kind of like early teenage years, in a very
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this panel on Lily's legacy. It's a great project that has been funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we're really glad that the National Lottery Heritage Fund might be here today watching this panel. In the office, in the Liberal Judaism office, we hear nothing but Lily's legacy. And so I am as excited as I hope many of you are to find out more about the great work that they have been doing. We have met earlier this week to pre-record this session, but we will be live following it in about 45 minutes in the studio to take all those questions from you at home, which you might have about how to find out more about Lily's legacy and how you can get involved. So please join us in 45 minutes in the studio to take your questions. I'm going to begin by moving my way around this panel and asking them to introduce themselves and their connection to Lily's legacy. And we're going to begin, it's only fitting, with you, Sian. Please let everybody at home know who you are, if they don't already, and what Lily's legacy means to you.
Hello, everyone out there. So my name is Sian Knan, and I am the project manager for the project Lily's Legacy, the Radical History and Heritage of Liberal Judaism in Britain. My full title is Heritage Project Manager. I've been working as a Heritage Project Manager for Liberal Judaism for the past 8 years. So I'm based at the Montagu Center there with Charlie and the team and so many amazing people. And I've been, had the privilege to run wonderful projects that are supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, as I said, for nearly a decade now. And yeah, so Lily's Legacy, the Radical History and Heritage of Liberal Judaism in Britain, is our latest lottery heritage project. We started it in November 2018. So it's been going on for nearly a year and a half, and we're sort of coming now towards the end of the project. But before we get there, which is part of the exhibition we're going to be talking about, let me just recap a little bit and tell you how this project came about and what actually the objectives are and what we have been trying to achieve. So the idea of this project we've created together at Liberal Judaism, the team, having run so many wonderful oral history and archive projects. We realized that we have such a rich history and we have so many wonderful, inspiring, amazing community voices, pioneers, including our founders in Liberal Judaism history and heritage. So there is definitely a project in there. We must collect those oral histories. We must have a platform, a better platform, a new platform for all these voices, for these different communities across the UK, to talk about the vision of Liberal Judaism, how Liberal Judaism evolved in their eyes, from their own perspective. So not in the history box, but literally from the people themselves. And of course,
Sian, let me ask you, just before you continue, it's really fascinating how it came about. But I know that at home, they're going to be, we last time I looked, we had over 800 people registered for the conference, and not all of them will be Liberal Jews. Not all of them have grown up like I have with the 3 M's ingrained in their blood, and they might be asking themselves, I don't know where they've been if they are, but just in case they're asking themselves, who was Lily Montagu?
Okay, well, I think to get a full answer, you will have to explore our exhibition, if you haven't, which we have been featuring all this biannual weekend, which is entitled Lily's Legacy, Voices and Visions of Liberal Judaism. Well, Lily Montagu, as we say in our exhibition, we consider as the prime founder of the liberal Jewish movement in the UK. Together with the other, as you said, the 3 M's, namely are Lily Montagu, Claude Montefiore, and Rabbi Dr. Israel Matuk. And those wonderful, our pioneers have founded together Liberal Judaism, starting from approximately, there are quite a few key dates, but we say one of those dates, it was 1902. So over a century ago. And so that was, well, I'm not going to go deeper into the story, but I think for me, this goes back to the title. Of course, Lily's Legacy is also dedicated to our other founders and pioneers. But it's sort of been, for me, a journey with Lily really working at the Montagu Center, hint, hint. And having always felt that Lily Montagu was a very special person, because if you look back at that time, women weren't really usually in leadership positions, and especially not in faith communities. So for someone like Lily Montagu coming out and saying, I want to create a movement that is different, that is a liberal movement, a liberal Jewish movement, a progressive faith movement, I found that always really fascinating and inspiring. So that's where the name comes from, and that's the core really of our history.
Thank you, Sian. That's really interesting. And then I know that you haven't done this, although you've coordinated, you haven't done this alone. You've had some really important volunteers helping you bring this material together. And I want to come to you, Sue. Maybe you can introduce yourself, but also tell us a little bit about what the process of collecting these histories has been like.
Hi, I'm Sue Temple. I heard about the project online one day. I was just looking through some, I don't remember the website, but there it was something about this project that just captured my imagination. And luckily I happened to bump into Danny Rich that following weekend, and there he was. And I asked him about it. He told me to call Sian, and that was the beginning. So I was in from the very beginning, for me, at the beginning of the project. And one of the key benefits of that is that I had the opportunity to contribute to the scope and design of the actual interviews themselves. So that meant that what we did, we had 2 days of quite intensive training, which was fantastic. The first day was, what is an oral history? And I came to the project confident that I'd be able to do interviews, because I've done a lot of that in my working life. But I didn't know what an oral history was, and I didn't know how that would differ from running an ordinary interview, and it is very, very different. So we had the training on day one, was that defining, scoping, understanding, and there's a lot of legal stuff to understand as well, because somebody might tell you something that someone else in their family isn't happy about. You have to have all kinds of disclaimers and caveats, and it was complicated and complex, and it was very, very interesting. Day 2 was a bit more challenging because it was the technical side, and Sian introduced us to this rucksack of equipment that we had to take into people's houses and use. And I think pretty much more or less everyone on the team found that a bit daunting at the beginning, but we got there. So armed with what wasn't exactly a questionnaire, but was more a sort of aide-memoire of themes that we wanted to cover in each interview, we went in sometimes to people's homes, sometimes we had interviews in schools, it depended. And so the pathway wasn't a linear one, as it might be in a normal interview. It just meandered around. But particularly, the way I did it was I made sure that each of those subject headings were covered by the end of the session. And it was absolutely fascinating. People were so generous with their time. It's been a massive privilege to have been allowed to be in someone's home or in their life for an hour and listen to these stories. Obviously, I knew about Lily Montagu in name, but I didn't know about her. I've read about her in theory, but this was a marker for the life of women in Judaism. It was fascinating from that point of view. A century since the first woman actually stepped up and said, let's do things differently. And that came out enormously in the interviews. There's so much to say about it.
Do you think you could give us a sense of what some of those questions you were asking people were?
Gosh, yeah, absolutely. The first question was how are you a liberal Jew? Were you born into liberal Judaism? Did you marry into it? Did you convert into Judaism from another faith? Are you a reluctant liberal Jew? A whole range of things. There were a number of my interviewees who were refugees. They came from Germany as children, and majority of those who I spoke to anyway had come from very orthodox German backgrounds, and because of the way their lives unfolded once they arrived here, for lots of different reasons, they found that there was liberal Judaism, and they were absolutely knocked out by the prospect of being able to be Jewish without all that heaviness and the sort of constricted life that they'd known before.
Thank you, Sue. It's really interesting. And Mike, you came in slightly later, but I wonder whether you can share some of your experiences.
Yeah, delighted to. So I'm Mike Beryl. I'm a member of the Liberals in New York Elstree. I've had a lifelong association and involvement with liberal Judaism, as well as my local congregation. When I retired about 18 months ago, one of the things I said I wanted to do more of was employ my video skills. There are lots of keen photographers, there are rather fewer people who play with video. And so when I suddenly came across this project, it was a fabulous combination of the right time, the right place, and the right people. So I had a conversation with Sean and got to understand what the aim of the project was, and particularly how the oral histories were going to work. And as Sue has said, oral histories are in a lot of depth, and that's fine. But by definition, there's a limit to the number of people that one can go and talk to and how many stories one can capture. So Sean and I agreed that what we maybe could do with video is go and talk to groups of people, particularly in various congregations, and ask them a fairly simple question. What's Lily's legacy to you? What's liberal Judaism to you? And what we ended up with were a whole series of short anecdotes, if you like, 5 or 10 minute clips of individuals, each answering that question in their own way. So we weren't trying to cover the whole of their life history, the whole of their liberal Jewish story, but just something that was really important to them. And so what we've ended up, if you like, is Sue and her volunteer colleagues have captured the depth. And through video, if you like, we've captured the breadth. We've been able to engage far more people, but not going in as deeply into the stories. And those stories have then ranged from everything from people's perceptions of why music is important in their liberal Judaism, how it's changed. Some wonderful anecdotes about individual rabbis, very formal and maybe slightly less formal. Individual stories, of course, of how they came to liberal Judaism, what's important to them. And so, yes, we've gathered that breadth.
Thank you, Mike. Sorry, please continue.
But then all of a sudden, COVID-19 hit us. And of course, the world changed. And suddenly, everybody was Zooming. 6 months ago, we hadn't really heard about it. But now here was an amazing opportunity to get out to an even larger number of communities. And so in the last literally 6 or 8 weeks, we've gathered a lot more video type content, in this case on Zoom. And so all of that also forms part of the Lily's Legacy Project exhibition.
Sounds really wonderful. And I love hearing stories of how people have been creative in the time of COVID and the opportunities that it's given us to connect in a really different way. And that combination of liberal Judaism as a home for people's Jewish story really comes alive in what both you and Sue have shared with us. Rabbi Dr. Miri Lawrence, hi, big title. We often hear another big title, which is that of curator. And I think for many of us, we hear that in association with art galleries or museums. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be the curator of Lily's Legacy?
Well, I think that some of the aspects of being a curator in a museum is exactly the same for this. I think key and sort of the original meaning of curator is somebody who kind of keeps things safe. And I think what's really important in this exhibition is really keeping people's stories safe and keeping them, preserving them for the future and presenting them in a way that really gives credit to as many people as we can get involved in the project. So in one respect, a sort of protector and keeper. Another way, really selecting what material is going to be used. And I think because of the nature of the project, one of the key things that I wanted to do was to have as many participants involved in some way so that all of their stories were represented. And I think that's one of the great things about the online exhibition, because we have the audio podcasts, we have text, we have the videos, we have the Zoom videos, and then we can keep hold of the transcripts as well.
Just remind us, Miri, we can find that, can't we, at Lily's Legacy project.com, and you can see that banner across your screen, so people can go there and see what you're talking about with the podcasts and the videos. Thank you.
Thanks. So there's a load of material in there for people to look at.
And how did you go about choosing which themes you would cover in that?
So that was partially dictated by the work that the volunteers had done. And I think what's different about this project, and particularly was sort of laughing about my title, but because I had just done an oral history project from scratch, it was quite a challenge for me to come in where I hadn't conducted the interviews or chosen the main questions or the themes. So initially I had to play catch up, because you remember those conversations, and then coming and listening to them, it's a different feeling. But looking at them, as well as the questions that you could see, there was a pattern that had been asked in each of the interviews. Certain themes came out really strongly. And so really I chose the themes by discussing with the volunteer groups. We had a training session about being a curator and how that works. And then really together, we sort of worked together to say which are the main themes, what might be added that we hadn't perhaps thought about initially, but also how do we get this to as few themes as possible? Because if it was too broad, then it's just lots of different bits. And I do believe we might have a bonus section in the videos, because there are some anecdotes and contributions of communities which I think are relevant not only to the Jewish community or the liberal community, but for interfaith or people who want to learn about Judaism, which we really want to include, that may not have fallen into one of those categories, but would be a real missed opportunity, particularly for the way that this project has evolved and all the people that are involved and that we want to reach from it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you for my next question, although I'm going to give all the panel a chance to answer it. But I'm really interested, particularly with you, Miri, is about what your highlights of being with this project are. Like me, a female rabbi in the liberal Jewish movement, perhaps felt the weight of Lily and her legacy sitting on our shoulder, and I wonder what's been your specific highlight about working with this project, or one of the stories you've heard?
I think really, like you, not only did I grow up hearing about Lily, but there was a large photograph of her at South London Liberal Synagogue that you kind of passed. So she was literally like a physical presence, and people would talk about her all of the time. And although I knew a bit of her history, it was absolutely fascinating to hear stories of people that actually knew her. So that in a way was a highlight. And also I had a really happy journey into the rabbinate, because by the time that I went to Leobeck College, there were, I think, 11 women rabbis before me. And through this project, really appreciating how Lily Montague was absolutely key, and really dedicated her whole life, not just to women, but to the community, is absolutely amazing. But the real highlight for me, I think, was really when we moved to Zoom, that I think that there was such an emotion about the community, because we were all processing what lockdown meant. And so people spoke with great emotion about what liberal Judaism means to them, what their community, and to see, this was also in Mike's first videos, where you see the interaction between congregants and the love and the humour between them. to capture that, when I've looked at some of the videos and listened to the podcast, I've been absolutely choked because it's really nostalgic for me. And everything kind of falls into place and has such huge relevance. It's been an amazing journey, absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Mary. It's such a privilege, really, to hear that way that the connection happens so deeply between what's someone's heritage and then into the way it can influence their current understanding of their own life and their connection to their Judaism, but the impact that actually that has universally outside our community as well. So thank you, Mike. Mary mentioned there one of her highlights being that move onto Zoom. Have you got a different highlight you would like to share with us?
Yes, I think so. So the project gave me as a volunteer the opportunity to go and visit a number of different congregations, some of which I had visited before, some of which I hadn't. And what was fascinating was to hear both the breadth of the different individual stories, but also the commonalities. And one commonality that kept coming through were people who said, I wasn't born or brought up as a liberal Jew. I may have been brought up in Judaism or not in Judaism. But at one point in my life, I started looking around and I was looking for a shul or a community where I felt comfortable. And I came to XYZ synagogue, whichever one it was we were at the moment. And almost to a person, they said, and actually I just stopped looking. I knew I'd arrived. This was it. Why would I carry on looking from here? And I've stayed. And in some cases, one of our interviewees says, and of course, within a year, I was on the council, loading the dishwasher, and all the other things that you do as our volunteers. And at the other end, we've got interviewees who said, and of course, 50 years on, I'm still doing whatever it is they're doing. And I think this consistent picture, and let's be honest, the interviewees were self-selecting, so they were going to say they felt comfortable, but there was such an enthusiasm for, if you found the home for your Judaism in a particular congregation, in a particular community, it's just no longer negotiable. It's where I am.
Thank you so much. Really moving to hear your accounts. Sue, please, would you share with us one of your highlights?
I would love to share my highlights. I talked to you earlier about the different themes that we ran through as we did the interviews. And it's just interesting hearing Mike and Miri, because the one that came through over and over and over each time was community. We talked about faith and family and background and a lot of politics. Rabbis were talked about a lot, I have to say. But ultimately, the number one thing which drives people is their sense of community and their belonging to their community. And some people had tried two or three liberal or progressive communities before they actually ended up at the one they're in now, as Mike said, for forever, making the tea, and is very, very, very strong. Also understanding the strength of the influence that Miss Lily, I have to call her Miss Lily now because the people who actually knew her called her Miss Lily. So that was huge. Because when you actually take a marker now, a century on, and compare where is liberal Judaism in comparison to some of the ideals that she started off with, I think people, she'd be pretty pleased. She'd be very pleased.
I think she would be very pleased and quite amazed actually as well.
Obviously, on a different side of things, I've been chuffed to have learned so much. At this age, it's such a gift to be able to learn a new subject, a new way of doing things, and I've loved that. Thanks, Sean. Great.
Well, Sean, that's a perfect place to come back to you, really. I don't know whether it's a totally unfair question to ask you what your highlight of this project has been, but maybe you'll try. And also just tell us, for those people at home who I cannot see that there's any way they cannot fail to have been inspired by what they've just heard, how they can explore the project a little bit more.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm going to answer that question, but personally, but also in my role as project manager, of course, for me, the absolute highlight is to see it all coming together. And not just that, just like you said a little bit before that, Charlie, I didn't do this on my own. I'm literally just the person who brings everyone together to do this, to enables people to participate, to learn, and all the rest of it to share. So for me, it's just every day an amazing experience, and more obviously now towards where we see where the production is underway and the launch is just imminent. How many amazing people from all walks of life have been working on this for the past 18 months, starting from our Liberal Judaism Montague Center office, the support there, the enthusiasm, to obviously everyone involved in liberal Judaism, all around, all the interviewers, also from all walks of life, all the contributors, including the interviewees, the people who have donated digital and also sometimes physical memorabilia. And a special shout out at this point, before I get to Alison Turner, who's the LJ archivist, who's also done amazing volunteering work for this project, to provide us with the information about historical items, to get shared images that we can use for the exhibition, and much more than that. Then I can't go into detail, but shout out to Alison Turner. She's been absolutely crucial to this project, and obviously the archive that we're going to be creating. I'm going to get there later, but coming back to the collaborative aspect, I can't even list up all the people, the amazing people from within, but also from outside the movement that have been part of this in this 18 months so far journey, and there will be more. And not to forget, this project is not just an eternal looking project. Really important is the outward looking aspect of this project. And we have, for example, a steering committee that's been also absolutely vital in this process, which is made up of over 15 people from completely different sectors and communities, including archives, museums, but also community groups, interfaith groups, and so on and so forth. And not to forget our wonderful oral history trainer that Sue mentioned, Verushka Calabria, who's also been with Liberal Judaism, doing the training for our volunteers for the past 8 years. So that's another really great thing, that there are also people from outside the community, outside Liberal Judaism, that keep coming back, that really, work with us, that create with us and share with us. And so that's for me personally, it makes me feel so fulfilled and excited that all these people, all these minds, these hearts, and come together, share skills, learn skills, produce something. And here we are, we're about to launch something really wonderful, which again, you should really explore. And this is leading to the question that Charlie asked. Yeah, so we have launched throughout this biennial weekend the Lily's Legacy exhibition, which you can access through the lilieslegacyproject.com website. You just have to go /exhibition and you'll find all the signposting on the landing page. If you just get to the lilieslegacyproject.com landing page, and there you can navigate into the exhibition. The exhibition has various chapters, which we call themes, and you just simply click on the theme that maybe appeals to you at this moment in time most, and start exploring podcasts, videos, images from the archives, newer images, wonderful texts, blog spots, and all sorts of heritage materials. And then you might want to explore another theme and another theme and another theme. There's plenty to explore. And
so Sean, tell people at home who may not be liberal Jews. So I know if I'm a liberal Jew, maybe my attraction to this project might be obvious. If I'm sitting at home, this is my first taste of liberal Judaism. Why go and explore the exhibition? What's in it for people watching?
I think even if you are not from the liberal Jewish community and you may not even know somebody, because obviously that's sort of the immediate, I know these people and I want to watch what they're saying. But even if you come from outside, be it from another faith community or non-faith community, I think community heritage is about people, and people, that's the human experience. And I think regardless of if we belong to a community, and in this case, liberal Judaism, we can always find connections. We can find the human connection, we can find the community connection, we can reflect. Everyone belongs to some kind of community or say identity group, and that's all what we're talking about, really. We're talking about people and their backgrounds, people and their journeys, people, what they believe in, what they don't believe in, the people they have come across, the people that have inspired them, what they've learned on their journey, where they want to go. So really, this is something that we all share as human beings. So I think all that packed up in a community heritage, it's a wonderful experience for everyone to actually explore and experience another community. So I would highly recommend for anyone outside liberal Judaism to explore this project. And who knows, it might actually inspire them to create their own community heritage and an archive collection, which again, I might be going fast forwarding, but this is actually the ultimate output of the project to create the Lily's Legacy archive collection, which will be, of course, part of the greater liberal Judaism archive collection, which is as a prime depository, the London Metropolitan Archives. So yes, archive creation is obviously a big part of this. And as I think it was Mary said, it is also about preserving heritage, and it's looking into the future. And as wonderfully, if I can quote Mike, who always said, it's like a time capsule. You know, and that's a beautiful to think that future generations can open that time capsule and see what people thought, you know, how they lived, where they wanted to go to, and perhaps reflect, oh, where did it actually go? So that's a wonderful thing, and not just, you know, for everyone, really, for all communities, including liberal Jews.
Thank you, Sean. And we are drawing to the end of us having a discussion, because we want to leave some time for, I know that there will be questions from people at home. But bouncing off a little bit from what Sean, where Sean just left us, is about what have you learned? So we're part of the wonderful thing about this project is what the potential of one community has to teach us about ourselves, that goes beyond an individualized experience. And I wonder whether, before we move to questions, if as briefly as possible, and maybe starting with you, Sue, you could share with us a little bit about what have you learned about yourself through this project.
I've learned that I'm even more interested in other people than I always knew I was, but that was the big pull. It is just a huge attraction to me to be able to sit in front of somebody and learn about their life. And continuing from the previous chat from Sean, other communities can learn from that, because we had a glimpse, particularly with the interviewees who are older. We got a snapshot of 20th century history as well, which was really, really interesting. I loved the learning. I loved the technology learning. I loved that part of it. Was great, and it made me concentrate on the never-ending question of where am I with my own belief, my own faith, and my own future in Judaism. It made me ask a lot of questions of myself.
Thank you, Sue, and I think it would be fascinating to hear some of the exploratory answers to some of those questions as well. Mike, same question to you.
So two things, I think. One is at the pure technology side. People who know me know that I'm fascinated with technology. But having this opportunity to get really into the depths of recording video for a very different purpose, a very specific purpose, has forced me into all sorts of different learnings. How to get the best out of the technology, how to make it as unobtrusive as possible, because there is a risk that it can get in the way of these sorts of very personal conversations. In terms of content, I'm not a great one for history. I never have been. It's never particularly fascinated me. But hearing people talking about their stories isn't history to me. That's their stories. And I guess, if nothing else, seeing how people's individual stories have formed them to where they are today. And in particular, what heritage that means we're now leaving, moving to the future. I found that absolutely fascinating as well.
Wow, thank you, Mike. And Miri?
Could I just add one thing?
Of course, Sue.
Onto that previously. I learned that an oral history, you don't actually have to ask a lot of questions. And that was very, very interesting, that you could actually sit in front of someone for over an hour and barely say anything and end up with that body that body of knowledge, which has been so fascinating. It's a totally different process to a normal interview. For that.
Thank you. Mary?
I mean, I think I've learned a lot of things along the way in terms of skills, particularly curating, which I hadn't actually done before. And although in a sense I'd done that with my own project, it felt a very different responsibility coming into a project that was well underway and having a responsibility to all the people that were involved at that point. I think also from having worked alone in a sense for quite a long time to work in a team, and I was so lucky with this team because it was such a joyful experience all the way through. So it kind of, I've come away from it thinking, yeah, working in a team's brilliant. So a lot of learning skills, first of all, when we talked about making podcasts, I mean, we had Lucia who has made the podcast, but working with her for the content, they were things I hadn't done before and seemed like way beyond my capabilities. But obviously we had the people involved that we could work together and use our skills. But I think what I've really come away with, and I don't know if it's partly because of this historical moment for us and the way the project changed in the last couple of months, was really the visceral attachment I have to liberal Judaism. And I have to say, at every interview that I listened to, I wanted to go and meet the person who was being interviewed. I'm just thinking, this person sounds so lovely. The guy that Harry Hurst, who narrated the podcast, just falling in love with his voice. But I just felt overall, I feel so proud to be a liberal Jew, and particularly going back to the Zooms where people were very open, and also in the videos, and ending their, whatever they had to say with phrases like, thank you, liberal Judaism. And I just feel so proud to be a part of it. And I have been a liberal Jew all my life and really connected to it, but I feel doubly so from this. I really do.
Thank you, Mary. Sian, I don't know whether you want to add something, whether after all these projects that you have been at the helm of, whether this project has felt more personal, possibly, and whether you've learned something too during it.
Yes, it's a fantastic question I could probably reflect upon for a long time, but I'm not going to. So yeah, as with all the projects, actually, I think they are personal. They are part of my journey as much as, it sort of takes its course, and they become part of me because they're part of my journey. And it's not just a project I work for, it's much more than that. Obviously this project, working at the Montagu Centre and then listening to all the liberal Jewish stories has also been an incredible journey for myself as a liberal Jew, having been part of this movement now for God knows, 15, 16 years. And I think I've learned from a personal perspective about that, about me, myself, my heritage, my identity. Again, not to echo, but echoing Mary's words, it's just, made me aware of how proud and happy I am to be part of this community, how much I feel that it is my community. But as a project manager as well, of course, there have been challenges along the way, plenty. And sometimes, you know, it of course feels like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? But there's always been a solution, and there's always been a constructive solution. And these solutions have not been, and again, I repeat this again and again, would have not been possible without all the amazing team members, from the core team to the Liberal Judaism staff, to all the volunteers and the steering committee, the youth advisory group, everyone that's been involved. And for me, obviously, that's increased also, I would say, my personal, but also my management skills. And I would even say, and maybe you can answer that, Charlie, as well. It's actually obviously meant a lot for us as an organization to grow, and specifically around resilience. And of course, community heritage is always important, but I think Liberal Judaism and also the Montagu Center office, we've learned a lot in this process, and which we can build upon and create perhaps other projects from that. And there's so much possibility that's being created, and I feel that's part of again my answer, the possibilities that's created for me professionally, personally, as a Liberal Jew, and beyond, that I actually really appreciate about this journey. And there's more to come.
Thank you, Sean. I have really enjoyed hearing, and I know that we're going to have questions from our audience at home. I would really like to take some time to explore what Sean just asked me myself, but I can certainly say that I think where we are in terms of Liberal Judaism at the moment is in a unique place of having confidence, of being really self-assured that we have something that we've inherited from Lily Montagu and from those who went before us, that has allowed us to still have much work to do, to inspire, to reach out, to have porous boundaries that allow so many people to come into our movement, and that should leave us feeling confident about the future that we have ahead. And I hope that this conference as a whole, as well as particularly this session, have given people at home a little insight or a little boost into feeling that even if we are in our own homes and making our own small part of Lily's legacy, that actually we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves, and that we can be very proud of our little movement that started from a small seed but has really come so very, very far. And here we are, still in our own homes, and obviously a few days later, and it's wonderful to see all of you. And we have been fielding a lot of questions that have come in from home, but everybody out there, if you've got more questions, then please, we will try in the short time that we've got left to get them to you. But the question that keeps being repeated, and Sean, I'm going to come to you to see if you've got an answer for it, which is, can we continue to add to this wonderful resource with further interviews? So I think there are so many people out there, and this one's come from Tamara, but we've seen it from many other people. Yes, another one from Paul Silvermeyer, which is, can people still be interviewed, Sean?
I think I will have to defer this question to people like Miri, Sue, and Mike. Miri, what do you think? I say yes.
I say yes if somebody will do the transcribing, which is the longest job. But yes, I think we should continue to add to it. And I think, you know, the more we can get more people involved, fantastic. So I'm up for it. I just need a transcriber. So anybody,
well, you hear them out there. If somebody wants to volunteer their transcribing skills, then the Lily Legacy team is really up for recruiting. One other question which I loved that came in was, is there somebody that you are desperate to interview, or is there a story that that you would like to still hear? And I'm going to give you the power into your hands of also transporting to wherever you want, back in time, forward in time. What is the Lily's legacy story that you would like to capture? Sian, let's come back to you first.
Well, my answer is probably not what you want to hear, but actually the beauty of this project and other oral history and heritage project is that every story is amazing. I'm hearing so many times when I meet, like, say, a liberal Jewish community member, and I say, oh, we're doing this project, and why don't you tell us your story? Oh, no, I don't really have any, exciting story. I've just been, I have a family, I work, I'm a part of a community. And then when you actually get to speak to that person, the most amazing, beautiful story comes out. So I think every story is amazing, every story counts. And so I couldn't really decide if there's a particular story that I would be looking for at the moment. I want to be surprised, because I think there's so much more there. There's so many more voices out there, and so many visions, as the title of our exhibition, Voices and Visions of Liberal Judaism. So that's my answer, but perhaps Mike, Miri, or Sue can answer this in a different way.
So I don't think there's any one individual that I would say that we have missed. As Sian says, we've got a wonderful mosaic, a wonderful mixture of voices from different backgrounds, from different communities. If we're underrepresented, I guess we're still underrepresented by the future generations of liberal Judaism. We've got some great input from people who are actively involved with LJY-Netzer. Today, we're probably less well represented by those who went through LJY-Netzer 10, 15 years ago and aren't yet fully re-engaged with their liberal Judaism as they build the next generation. So that's the part which I would say, if anything, we're underrepresented. There's a comment that Sian kindly quoted of me earlier on, which is that what we've built is a time capsule here. And in 50 years' time, when somebody opens up this time capsule and says, so what was liberal Judaism all about in the year 2020? There's that little part of our community who maybe are underrepresented, and I'd love to still be able to fill those gaps.
So you heard that here. Paul's offered to transcribe, well, at least his arts interview, but maybe there'll be other people out there who'll offer to transcribe. And
email me, Paul, please.
And Mike's made a big shout out for the underrepresented generation, who I think are the ideal candidates for our passport scheme anyway. So we'd like to hear from you in many, many different ways. And I hope this weekend has inspired that generation and that group to want to be involved again and re-engage with their liberal Judaism. Sue or Miri, is there somebody that you would like to hear from?
You mentioned that we could be time travelers, and I think it would be great if we could interview someone who was around when Lily was around and see what do they actually think about what she was trying to do and the changes that she was making to the practice of Judaism. I think that would be extraordinary if I could travel back in time. But I certainly agree with Mike that the kids, it'd be lovely to have some more interview with the kids currently. That would be marvellous.
Thank
Can I just throw in before we put the mic over to Mary, that actually some wonderful people who were part of some interviews with LJY-Netzer have now, we're going to meet from next week, and we're going to create a project within the project which is called LL the Next Generation. So sounds like a sci-fi movie already, if you're asking me. So I'm really looking forward to working with many young people on that from next week. So here we go. Into the future.
Wow, thank you. You heard it here first. Thank you, Sian. Miri.
On the subject of transcribing, I wanted to put a vote in for Mike, because we were struggling with the labour of love of doing all the transcribing, but he came along with some new software and it changed our lives.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Miri.
So obviously, I echo what everybody else has said about particularly young people and some people that maybe didn't realise about the project and would like to be involved. But I would really like to go back in time. And one thing that really made me think was in one of the Zoom interviews with some of Lily's family, including Rabbi Rachel Montague, a number of people that we interviewed really owed their lives to Lily, who brought people over, and particularly rabbinic students. And Rachel mentioned that possibly one of those people was Regina Jonas, and that she made the decision to stay with her mother. And we know that she then perished in the Holocaust. And that kind of blew my mind, because I just thought the course of liberal Jewish history could have been completely changed if Regina had come over to this country. And I hadn't made that connection.
Mary, do you think you could just, there will be people who, for you and I, Regina Jonas feels like a very much part of our history, but there will be people outside of here who won't know who she is. Could you just...
So she trained as a rabbi in Germany. And I'm just trying to think off the top of my head if she was actually ordained, or if it was, I can't hear you.
She was ordained, although more of a private ordination, we think.
Yeah. So presumably, had she come over to this country, even if it was a private ceremony, she was officially ordained as a rabbi. And there's been a lot of debate as in the course of this as to whether Lily would have wanted to be a rabbi. We know that she preached. She did talk about that the time would come for women rabbis. It just wasn't quite time yet. So from that point of view, that just historically really fascinated me. And the other person I would have liked to have interviewed was her sister Marion, because everybody talks about Marion. It was Lily and her sister, and I would just be interested to know what it would be like being Lily's sister, that people were clearly really, really fond of, but it's really Lily's name that has become synonymous with liberal Judaism. So
thank you, Mary. Yeah, really fascinating answer. I'm really conscious of time, and that there's still so much that people want to know. And one of the questions that people would like to ask is, what is in the exhibition? So what can they find in there? Sian, should we begin with you and then we'll come to Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the exhibition, you can enter the online exhibition via the lilieslegacyproject.com website. From either the main site, and you also found exhibition and drop down menu. You click, you arrive on that page, and then you've got the introduction, which I recommend reading. It's a great introduction written by Miri with the volunteer team. It's fantastic. And then you can choose in the drop down menu 10 different themes, and perhaps Miri can later on, if we have the time, talk a bit more about that. But and then you choose what interests you most perhaps today, and you click on that, and then once you click on the theme, you arrive at on a different page, a theme page, and then you will find, again, blogs, texts. You find a podcast for each theme. The podcast, some of them you've actually been able to listen here throughout the biennial weekend already. And we've got a wonderful, amazing selection of videos. And that's when I then zoom over to Mike to continue with us.
So there's something like 90 different video clips within that exhibition across each of the 10 themes. Most of them were recorded as group sessions within various congregations. And in the last 8 weeks or so, we've suddenly moved to Zoom as well and managed to collect a whole lot more video content as well. So yes, it's a real multimedia digital exhibition. And that will be at least part of its permanent home. All of the material will formally be deposited with the London Metropolitan Archives. That'll be its long-term home as well. And of course, all of this, we must remember to acknowledge our sponsors, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who are a major sponsor of the whole project, leading to this today, its launch.
Absolutely. none of this would have been possible without the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we are really, really grateful for their partnership with Liberal Judaism, which has brought so much richness and diversity to not only our understanding of ourselves, but our outreach and into the larger community. So we're very, very grateful, and we know that they are too very proud to have partnered with Liberal Judaism again. Miri, Sian mentioned there about the themes in the exhibition. Could you just tell us a little bit about those?
Okay, so the themes really came from the interviews, although, as you heard Sue say earlier, there was some scope for where the initial questions were going to be. And then once the interviews had taken place, we looked at what were the key themes. So we start off really with the different ways that people came to know about Liberal Judaism and to choose it. And we then looked at youth and intergenerational aspects of Liberal Judaism. And we also looked at other key things that we think are really key, like gender equality and inclusivity and diversity, and an overwhelming feeling that everybody is welcomed into Liberal Judaism and that many people have found their Jewish home there. We also wanted to obviously look at Lily, but also some of the other founders and pioneers of Liberal Judaism. And many people remembered either rabbis or lay leaders as they were growing up. So we tried to include as many of those. And then really finish by looking at where we think we're going now, what we think Lily might have thought of us as we are today, and what we want in the future.
Thank you, Miri. Yeah, big themes. We've got a couple of minutes, and I want to come back to what you just said there, Miri, which is about what would Lily make of our legacy. And it feels like this is the last workshop session really of our biennial conference, and we're about momentarily going to join Rabbi Aaron for our take-home piece. But I wouldn't mind, I know it's a big challenge, but I wonder whether any of you could offer what Lily would think of the legacy of Liberal Judaism today. And maybe had she been a participant watching this conference this weekend, what would she have thought of the legacy?
I think she'd be really, really pleased with where things are now. Because if the things that we learned, that I learned during the interviews with people who may have actually met her, was that she was somebody that wanted this inclusive area of an opportunity to practice a religion without the constraints that had previously been there for people, and especially for women. And for example, making services on a Saturday afternoon so that young girls who were working could work in the morning, and that's a small example. But the way that Liberal Judaism has developed over this last century would be absolutely in line with what she had hoped for. I think she'd be delighted.
Thank you, Sue. Sian, did you want to add something and to tell people as well how they can get in touch with you?
Well, I just wanted to add one of the quotes, and again, coming back to what's in the exhibition, it's full of quotes. Everything is based on what people told us. It's not a history book. It's literally the voices and visions of the Liberal Jews that we've interviewed. And thank you to all those contributors again and again and again. We couldn't have done this without you. But Lily Montagu said, I can't quote it like verbatim, but something on those lines, and you will see it in our exhibition. We tried to define Liberal Judaism. Thank God we didn't manage. So I think that's so much really, you know, we can still do and transform our communities, our liberal Jewish communities, and it's just an amazing journey we're on. So I really need to take the opportunity to thank everyone so much, the whole team, the people in this room here, but Liberal Judaism, and also like the whole team. There is a great amount of people working on this, including our web designer and designer who's been like working on this 24/7 to make this launch happen. And you find the full list of thank yous and acknowledgements as well in the exhibition list. Please do go there, and if you know those people, you meet them, say, wow, thank you, good job, because really everyone's worked so hard on this, and it's really important to acknowledge that it's all about collaboration. It really is. And what I thought it was wonderful this weekend to see like so many people that feature in our exhibition and in Lily's Legacy, either they were mentioned in people's oral histories or themselves were interviewees. For example, Danny Rich, Simon Bencher, Tamara, Joseph, many rabbis, Rabbi Mark Sullivan, Rabbi Janet, both Janets, and so on and so forth, endless list. All these people were actually there, or Ed Kessler, and then we hear actually Joe Kessler. So it was like a constant bouncing off, and I thought that really worked beautiful, and another kind of collaboration. So I'm just, from my end, finish off with a huge thank you. I'm immensely proud of us, our team, the movement, and I can only say thank you, and to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for supporting this project.
Thank you, Sean. What a perfect way to end. Thank you all for being part of this panel and all the wonderful work you've done on behalf of Liberal Judaism.
Contact me on Lily's Legacy Project. I've got, what's our email? Help me.
It's on the website. It's on the website.
It's on the website.
Thanks, Mike. Before I start something that's actually not true, you can always contact me via Liberal Judaism. We're obviously physically not there, but in the cyberspace. Just if you can't find a Lily's Legacy or me, contact the office and Montague Centre, and they forward
this is the big disadvantage of not being on Zoom, is that I don't have the power of mute. We are now at the end of our time.
Thanks, Sally.
And I do have to pass over to Rabbi Aaron as we begin our take-home process. Thank you, everybody. Hi, Aaron. You need to unmute yourself, Aaron. There we go.
Good afternoon, everybody. I was just keeping myself on mute to be very, very quiet and on my best behaviour. Wow, what a phenomenal biennial weekend we have experienced. We can measure things in so many different ways. We can quantify things. Normally, we would have about 300 people physically present at a biennial weekend. And we have had around 1,500 people, that's just registered, not counting all of the other people who have watched online and consumed. I know there was even a few of my colleagues who hadn't quite got around to registering as well amongst those numbers. So there must have been closer to 2,000 people experiencing this biennial. But even if we just go on the registered numbers, 5 times the number of people accessing this biennial weekend than who would have been able to be physically present for one. And what about the quality? What an incredible level of thought has been expressed. The theme has spoken to presenters and participants personally, amongst congregations, within the movement and more globally as well. And it's been incredible to have people from outside of liberal Judaism commenting and giving their thought in response to the way that we have been thinking. A huge big shout out to the conference committee and the strategy and comms team of Liberal Judaism. Collaboratory was an inspired concept. What about the definition of collaboratory? Some of us have had difficulties getting the word out, but what of the definition and how do we grab hold of it? The collaboration has been clearly demonstrated throughout this biennial. We've included a really incredible, diverse group of voices, and yet also demonstrated a confident and unified voice. It has been a true collaboratory effort to bring everybody together and along on this journey. People, regardless of their age, their location, have been able to access this, and that's been true when I've been able to identify members of my own congregation who, at the beginning of all of this, struggled to get online and get used to this new reality. And now here they were, enjoying the incredible depth of our collaboration, experiencing the diverse voices of all of my colleagues, all of the lay people who have contributed to this conference and enriched their Jewish experience. And then what about the laboratory side? Well, laboratory needs a huge amount of confidence. Huge amounts of confidence to, in a sense, let go and let that diversity loose. Sometimes there are contradictory opinions and thoughts. Sometimes we find ourselves in opposition to another. But knowing in this environment of collaboration that we can do so safely, securely, and that the outcomes will be new, powerful, and perhaps exceedingly dynamic. So we can approach this COVID period as we have done as a liberal Jewish movement by changing and adapting without losing our own self-identity, because we can have a confidence in liberal Judaism, which is always moving, changing, adapting. We now know that we do that best when we come together in collaboration. This is not just a self-congratulatory note, though. There are significant areas where we know that we can hold our hands up and we can do better. Danny Rich, in his address, said, "I think we can be a little braver and a little less squeamish about the nature of modern relationships. We still have a long way to go in how we welcome the non-Jewish partners of our children." And certainly some of the comments which came in on Facebook to some of the sessions and some of the people who were speaking showed that that is quite true still. This can also be said in the area of social justice and action. Whilst we have so many liberal Jews and liberal Jewish congregations or communities doing and significantly engaged in this area, we can do a lot more to give volume to our voice. There are significant issues also that have been raised, both in the sessions that we have had and also with the questions that have been put this afternoon to me. I don't have the right to sit here all on my own, having had all of these wonderful panels, and just to be able to answer them all. Rather, I'd like to pose some of the questions that have been raised, and a downside of not actually being together in one room and you going into breakout rooms and talking about this right now. Instead, to come together at future opportunities. One of the consequences of our lockdown has been that our council meetings are full. You don't have to come down to London to the Montague Centre or up or sideways to the Montague Centre. You can be there quite easily in the comfort of your own home. And so lay leaders from communities have come together and begun to use those spaces to be able to talk with each other and to engage with the national movement in a new, enriched way. And indeed, every Thursday, there is the opportunity to come together with Liberal Judaism staff and rabbinic colleagues to talk about different areas of interest that we might share, exploring ways of collaboration. We also move towards, on the 7th of July, the AGM of Liberal Judaism. And so I do hope that this year will show the highest attendance at Liberal Judaism AGM for many decades. Please come and engage and bring and engage in some of the questions that we face as a movement. It was very clear that a number of people were very concerned that we explore seriously the relationship, collaboration with other movements and institutions. And in particular, Reform Judaism and the Liebet College were named by a number of people writing in. Frank Maxwell from Birmingham, Alison Turner from the Three Counties, and David Kirk from Northwoods and Pinner Liberal Synagogue. All concerned with how we might come together as three organisations, perhaps as one. The question was raised saying, well, we've had the progressive Jewish movements of the world and Europe coming and engaging with us through this process over this weekend. What about Liebet College and Reform Judaism? Where are they in all of this? This is the question that we are seriously grappling with, and we're also focused on moving forward with the self-confidence of liberal Judaism, clear about our own value set, clear in the understanding that we are actually in a very strong and confident situation, and to be able to make sure that we respond appropriately as trustees of liberal Judaism, to ensure that we, unless we want to change them or think about changing them, think about the current constitution that we have as an organisation, and to make sure that we are true to them. So it will be that we will move forward into conversations with other organisations with strength and with self-confidence and a very clear understanding of what values that liberal Jews want to maintain within any future organisation that they may be affiliated with. We've also had a couple of superb questions from Michael Hart. Michael asked, in the light of developments over the past couple of months, should we be revisiting ways of increasing greater sharing of rabbinic input between communities? Is the traditional model of each community having or aspiring to have its own separate rabbi looking rather dated? There are already situations where rabbis are collaborating. And as we look forward to Shavuot, we can see that a good number of our communities are coming together and our rabbis coming together to share their knowledge, experience and skills together with lay people within the community and to share that with other congregations. This is not just an issue of big or small or matching people up. It's a matter of organically colleagues and communities coming closer and closer together. This period, of course, has allowed us to do that. And in response to that, I think that we need not fear competition, for collaboration is really what we are about. No one is trying to poach anybody's members. What we're trying to do is to provide more and more enriched experiences for liberal Jews, and those who are Jewish to come and explore. And my experience has definitely been that the more Jewish people do, the more connected they are with their congregation and have a desire to input to it. And a follow-up question, which is also immensely relevant to this time, is that given the development of technological initiatives, will we still continue to need so many synagogue buildings? Could there be a lot more sharing in future between different Jewish denominations or even with other organizations and faiths? I'm not going to try to even approach that one, but we know that it is a very good one. We are in a moment of great change, and who knows what is going to happen with physical property into the future. What we can say is that we within liberal Judaism and within our liberal Jewish congregations are demonstrating that we can still be community within our new reality. Within our congregation, I basically banned the word, or we have basically banned the word virtual. It's not virtual. It's our reality at the moment. And there will be times when we will get together and be able to touch each other or be in a physical space together. But we are in a space together now. And yes, there are some downsides. At the same time, we are creating community, maintaining community, and indeed, we are expanding the notion and name of community. One of the speakers that really, really impressed me during this biennial, somebody I haven't met before, was Owen Power from our Manchester liberal Jewish community. And he wrote this question or comment to us. Our biennial has surpassed all expectations. It has been a weekend of unity, optimism, and joy. I'm a member of the Manchester Liberal family, the smallest of our liberal Judaism communities. The success of the weekend is evidence Collaboration is the way to go and will help to secure the survival of our small communities. It is my experience some fear collaboration, as they fear it will lead to a loss of identity. In my view, this fear is misguided and prevents a community from growing and reaching its full potential. To help secure the future of small communities, my question is, would Liberal Judaism consider appointing an unpaid collaborative champion to liaise with our small communities, share good practice and coordinate informal meetings? 1,000 thanks to the Biennial organisers for such a magnificent job they did. What a brilliant idea, and something that I know that we will want to respond to. Firstly, let me say that the Thursday evening opportunities will be continuing into the future. Perhaps into the future, they may not be every week, but certainly the power and importance of them has shown a real desire within our communities of all sizes to come together, to share ideas, and it has been a brilliant way for us to be able to communicate. And then also to be able to collaborate, because resources can then be shared where we know here is a need and here is a provider. And we've been able to match people up in this way. Owen, you have presented some really good questions and thought-provoking pieces around inclusivity within your speech. Many others have done as well, and we will be coming back to them. And I hope that people will really enjoy and come back to some of the seminars. Maybe you missed one, or maybe you wanted to go back and check out exactly what somebody said, because over the coming weeks, you'll be able to see those seminars as unique, distinct pieces. There's also a piece that came up. I don't know if Leo is around, and I haven't been able to have the wherewithal to read at the same time the comments coming up, as well as reading my screen and to be able to concentrate in speaking with you. I'm sorry, I'm getting far too old. But we have had a question which has come in about the nature of what Liberal Judaism provides to a community. This was, Leo is here, fantastically so. It was my colleague, Leo Mulstein, who sent round to many of colleagues a piece from Andrew Keane, who is a very important leader within the World Union. And you can find his piece on e-Jewish philanthropy. He wrote, "There is one shift that I believe will catapult organizations towards long-term viability. A shift from program to platform." And so there's a question about what Liberal Judaism is into the future as an organization. Is it the all-important programs that we necessarily provided, or is it a platform which is going to enable our resources to get out there? I, in particular, I'm sure that Charlie and Ruth are going to thank Leo later on, but I wanted the opportunity in particular to be able to personally thank Leo, not just Leo, but his entire family, and also all those connected in his team who have enabled this, because you have provided the platform. So, Leo, I just wondered if you wanted to respond to that idea from Andrew.
My personal view is that platforms enable things. They enable views and opinions, but the views and opinions are far, far more important than the platform. The book was a platform, TV is a platform, radio is a platform. The views and opinions are far more important, and it's enabling those, and now being able to allow those to be spread literally to every single corner of the world is just fabulous. But it's down to the people and their opinions, which are far more important than the platforms that we use.
That's amazing. Thank you, Leo. And I hope it's not the last time that we'll have the opportunity to thank you. We have the most incredible resources of human resources within thought and within action. And at the same time, we cannot underestimate this platform. We would not have been able to do this without having the platform, and you absolutely provided that. I know that all congregations and communities are considering the appropriate platforms that we use, and I've had the most wonderful engagement with Mark from Mosaic over the last few days, talking about the pros and cons of different approaches, and each community will choose different ones. There is not one right approach. And actually, again, this collaboration is about we amongst ourselves can provide different experiences. Northwood and Pinner is down the road from South, or in between South Bucks and Mosaic. Northwood and Pinner cannot provide the same experience as Mosaic and South Bucks, and equally those two can't do the same as Northwood. And it's providing that richness of experience that when we work in collaboration rather than in competition, we see that we're able to provide for liberal Jews and Jews full stop. And really, I hope that that will be our mission going forward, to look at what we can do using platforms to provide the basis for our wonderful human beings that we have within our movement, to provide thought leadership, and also to get off our tush and get into action and justice as well. Another question that was picked up was from the Wessex community, Gillian Dawson for the Wessex community, asking, and it was in response, I think, to the interfaith panel session today, saying that it's clear that friendships learnt young will be the future of interfaith good relations. I'd just like to say, having seen what LJY-Netzer has done, and to see their graduates, the Bogrim, Bogrot, contributing so unbelievably to this conference. And Charlie, I include you and me and so many of us, people like me who are a lot older than some of the people who have contributed, but it doesn't, each one have been the beneficiaries of having come through OPSNIC or LJY-Netzer or other youth movements and other groupings. So you're quite right, Gillian, that the friendships, not only the friendships, but the richness of identity that our youth movement provides us is absolutely vital. But you talk about this in an interfaith, with an interfaith perspective. And so you were saying, any suggestions on practical ways that this can be established in our synagogues, bearing in mind that some, in brackets including parents, are fearful or concerned to be able to put our foot in. I'm now adding my own words to that to extend that out a bit, to engage in this area. And well, we may be in different areas of the country with different demographics and working within very different communities, and our approaches may be different to it in that way. Again, I'm not going to seek to try to answer that question, but I think it's something that is really well worth us thinking about as a movement, but in particular also LJY-Netzer, and to have them perhaps consider this. How can we reach out? They already do fantastic work. Certainly seeing them around Mitzvah Day and on many other occasions, working with people of other faiths, young people, bringing people together is inspirational. And so perhaps we can connect you up in that way as well. I'd love to invite all of you, as I say, to come along to our AGM on the 7th of July. To be involved. It has been my honour to be involved within liberal Judaism, OPS as it then was. Literally all of my life I was born into it. Some of us convert into it through various different guises and have different journeys. But what has been incredible is to hear all of the Jewish stories that have been expressed through the Lily's Legacy podcast, which has been inspirational. Through hearing so many individuals talking amongst themselves and talking over lunch. How phenomenal. Normally we might get 30 to 50 people coming along maximum to a lunch and learn session, but we were talking very close to 100 households each time, so a couple of hundred people coming together. And this matches up with the experience of Janet Berkman, who spoke from the Peterborough Jewish community, about how their community were down to almost single figures. But because of the engagement, the work with Danny Rich and within liberal Judaism, now she just offhand quoted 50 plus people. Well, that is quite miraculous. If we can times by 5 the number of participants at biennials, times by 5 the number of people that become engaged within our community, then we know that we will have been doing something right quantifiably. And at the same time, there is something absolutely qualitative about the way forward for us as a movement. We know that if we want to have a prophetic voice, to keep on saying that we do have a prophetic voice, we need to put ourselves out there. And one of the enduring quotes I think Lauren Kiley's gave today was quoting, she says, a colleague, but I'm amazed that she can just remember these things and provide these quotes. A leader should be one step ahead of their followers, but if they're 2 steps or further ahead, they might not be a leader, but just a person on a walk. And I think that's something that we absolutely need to engage with. It's not easy being leaders, and it's not easy being liberal Jewish leaders, putting our heads forward and sometimes leading people who don't necessarily want to move forward. I loved also the notion of the imperfect leader. It was one of the standout moments of the biennial for me, hearing Matthew Gould, a top civil servant at the heart of our contemporary disaster, in conversation with Danny Finkelstein, undeniably smart guys, and also utterly decent. It is the kind of realism, humility, and sense of purpose that I see in liberal Judaism at this junction. It is not necessarily about utter perfection, getting every little bit right, and especially not expecting that within each individual person. Rather, it's about building leadership teams that complement and challenge. The coronavirus pandemic has challenged Kolrak. It has seen us as a body fundamentally disagreeing with each other. And yet those disagreements have been our strength, each one of us hearing each other in the most respectful of ways. It is true that decisions have to be made by leaders, but they are most respected when those leaders are surrounded by those who provide divergent viewpoints. This was for me a key take-home from this session, and something that I hope will provoke us all to seek out teams, people that we can collaborate with, not just those who agree with us, but sometimes those who fundamentally disagree. In that way, we will truly be able to move forward. I have thoroughly enjoyed being in this collaboratory. It has been a space, an experience, and it has been one that has utterly engaged so many people. Who would have thought we would have spent so much time in front of our screens and cameras? Many, many people doubted that. But we have proven that we are able to be together as community, to be together as liberal Jews, to bring together 40+ communities, and to engage with each other as one liberal Jewish movement.
Thank you so much, Aaron. What a fantastic way to bring together everything from this conference. I'm not quite sure how you do it, but every biennial you manage to not only do the most incredible sum up of what has happened, but also still leave us with big questions and things to take away, and perhaps most importantly, a challenge for us to go forward and do more, and you have really left us with that. We are coming...
The most difficult thing to know, I was just going to say, the most difficult thing to do as rabbi is not to go religious. But I had to leave that to my dad and Gershon. So if anybody thought, why wasn't Aaron talking about the... I'm leaving that to them.
Well, Aaron, one of the things that we did talk about was the amazing way that actually you and I talked about was the amazing way that God has appeared, that there has been theology spread from the very first panel. We have seen a liberal Jewish theology being talked about right through those beautiful services, both on Erev Shabbat, on Shabbat morning, which was quite incredible, through Monique's service this morning, but also in every single workshop, we have seen a liberal Jewish theology being talked about, being wrestled with, being in collaboration. So you may not have mentioned God specifically by name, but certainly God has been very present, I think, in this conference.
God has been in the house.
God has been in the house, indeed. And I want to invite into our house now exactly those people that you were just referring to. Ruth Seeger, our acting chair of Liberal Judaism, and Rabbi Dr. Andrew Goldstein, our president of Liberal Judaism. Oh, and Sharon as well. Why not?
Hello. That's a full smile.
Hello, Ruth. Hello, Andrew. Hello, Sharon. Welcome. Ruth, it's over to you.
Okay. Hello. It's nice to see you again. So I'm sitting here, feeling and overflowing with pride. I am so proud. I am Jewish Mum proud of our movement and everyone who has made this first online biennial the success that it is. To have transferred a biennial from its normal hotel format to an online version would have been a tremendous achievement, even if it had just been okay. But to have created an event of this quality, this richness, depth and variety is truly amazing. The Shabbat morning service was a masterpiece. A masterpiece of singing, flair, technical prowess, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house during our thank you to Danny. Our young people have, yet again, made contributions to the high standard that we've come to expect of them. And we have all heard, learned and thought a great deal about the nature of collaboration. I am humbled to have the honour of being the acting chair of Liberal Judaism. And on your behalf, I have many people to thank, and I'll come to that shortly. Something that I will take away is that being able to collaborate, to work together as a community, you not only need shared objectives and reciprocity, but also shared values. This is a recipe for our success in Liberal Judaism. There will always be a range of views. We'll have our discussions, and we won't agree on everything, but the rabbis, the professional staff, the communities and the trustees are all on the same page. And now it is my pleasure to thank all those who made this biennial at home possible. It's a long list for which I make no apology. So first, I begin with the technical team. Leo Mindel, John Fiber, and Alexander Mindel. None of this would have been possible without them. Leo pushed us to think big, and he promised to deliver on that vision, which he did. They have worked tirelessly and they've been on call 24/7 for weeks now. I thank our keynote speakers, Matthew Gold, Lord Daniel Finkelstein, Rabbi Danny Rich, and Ofek Meir, and along with all those presenters whose sessions have provided so much food for thought. The tributes to Simon and Danny were lovely, and we will find time to celebrate again when we can be there in person. I thank the service leaders and those who sang so beautifully, the musicians and the editors of music, the editors and the editorial team of the new Siddur. We thank the committee, which was chaired by Rabbi Rennie Fertzel and included student Rabbi Gabrielle Cantor-Weber, Graham Carpenter, Karen Newman, Rabbi Alex Wright, Rabbi Janet Darley, Jill Rosenheim, Rebecca Singerman-Knight, and Anthony Bilms. We thank Sean Nan, his team, the curator, Rabbi Miri Lawrence, and the contributors for the creation of Lily's Legacy. And that's the project that records all our Jewish histories. And thanks to Mike Beryl for all the editing provided for this weekend. I thank the staff team led by our very own Charlie, and Tom Rich, who's been the heart and soul of all the logistics. Thank you, Tom. There's Izzy, who will be sorely missed as this is her last event as part of the professional team. There's Simon Rothstein, who, along with Ben, has managed all the comms. Shelley, who's never seen up front but essential in the back room. Rafe, who you have seen. And Becca, who led the youth team supported by Rosa. I thank those who are always right behind me when I look round for support. And that's my fellow trustees on the Board of National Officers, the SMT of LJ, and our rabbis. I thank the chair of Colrac, Rabbi Aaron Goldstein, and our presidents, Rabbi Andrew Goldstein, for their contributions to this conference, to the movement as a whole, and for their personal support for me. It's much appreciated. Finally, if this biennial isn't living proof of our expertise and collaboration, then I don't know what would be. Thank you all. Thank you for showing up and for taking part. I hope to see you at the next conference, if not before.
Thank you very much, Ruth. What a fantastic thanks of everybody. It's always such a hard job to do at the end of conference. And thank you to you for everything that you've done. And a thank you from me for all of the committee and for the staff team. Very much appreciated. And to echo my thanks for Leo and his team, who have just been out of this world. No conference would be complete without a closing from our president and our senior rabbi of our movement, Rabbi Andrew Goldstein. Andrew, it's over to you.
Thank you. The word pride has come up a number of times, and I sit here with an immense pride in the movement. It's been noted that my wife Sharon's sitting next to me, and we have great pride, first of all, in seeing Aaron give such a great presentation, knowing that our daughter Ruth was involved in the singing, that our grandchildren have come up and are so involved with their friends in LJY. It's a great sense of satisfaction. Has been mentioned a number of times that the generations have gone on through the families, but also to notice many names on the screen of people who are new to liberal Judaism, who haven't had that experience of going through our youth movement, but are adding strength to our movement now. I have to say that to see Ruth Seeger there leading as our chair has also added something, and to know that even at a time of change, we'll be able to carry on our traditions and know that we have a great future. Well, in terms of my final thoughts, today is Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Sivan is the month of giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai that we'll celebrate at Shavuot on Thursday night and Friday. Rosh Chodesh Sivan found our ancestors in the wilderness, not knowing what the future would hold. And yet the event at Mount Sinai confirmed our identity as a Jewish people, gave us an identity as a people. This conference has been held in a sort of wilderness at a time outside of normal time. And though I can't guarantee this conference has brought us a new revelation of God, although, as I think Ruth said, in the services and in the presentations, we have known very much that we are a religious movement and that God is there in many of our discussions. But this conference has certainly confirmed our identity as liberal Jews. And it's been a revelation that, well, the numbers change. Is it over 1,000? But it's certainly around 1,000 people have gathered. As the Bible said, men, women, and children, and the strangers in our camp. We've gathered as a movement and as a unique family. At Sinai, our people became Am Segulara, special people. And this conference has united us as a Mishpacha Segula, as a special family, a family of liberal and progressive Jews. Today is Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and for me, one of the most perfect prayers that we have in our present prayer book, Siddur Lev Chadash, is the one composed by Rav in the 3rd century. The prayer to be said on Rosh Chodesh or on the Shabbat before. This prayer, Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, may this month of Sivan and the months ahead, and may this weekend that we've spent together be a time of renewal. Grant to our movement and to each of us a long life of peace and blessing, a life of prosperity and health, a life guided by conscience, unmarred by self-reproach or shame, a life exalted by love of Torah and the reverence of the divine, a life in which the longings of our heart may be fulfilled for good. And the final words of this ancient prayer are so especially appropriate at this very moment and this time at which we live. Rav said, may it be the will of the Holy One ever to be praised, that this month bring for us, for our movement, and for the whole house of Israel, life and peace, happiness and joy, deliverance and consolation. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Andrew. It is really important now more than ever that liberal Judaism is accessible to all. And that's why Biennial Home is being delivered completely free of charge for anybody who wishes to access it wherever they are. The weekend, as you have seen, has showcased some of the service and content that is delivered by our amazing rabbinic and lay talent, as well as our collaborative partners. But to continue to do so costs money. It's a difficult time for many of us. And although attending this biennial puts you under no obligation to, I do hope that if you can afford to, you will choose to make your way over to the Liberal Judaism website and make a donation. Every generous donation helps us at Liberal Judaism to continue to serve its members and to continue to be the home for everybody's Jewish story. Thank you.
It's clear that in addition to the challenges that our leadership and staff have had to deal with and have met so beautifully, none of which anyone could have foreseen a few months ago, we've also seen some positive things arise out of it. People who might never have been able to attend our biennial have been able to participate, and our outreach to the wider Jewish world has been more international than ever. A shout out now to members of my community in Texas who joined us from 6 time zones away. And now we turn to a closing song that we will sing together even while far apart. The text comes from the conclusion of the Book of Lamentations. It recognizes immense and terrible changes, the destruction of the center of worship and many deaths, the end of the Jewish world as it had previously been known. And it also looks forward with hope and faith towards a renewal that will bring a redemption utterly different from what had gone before. Turn us to you, O God, and we shall truly be transformed. Renew our days as in the past. It doesn't wish for a repeat of the days of the past, but for a renewal as complete as those that we have known before. This setting of the text is a 3-part round. You can sing one part over and over if you want, or you can try all the parts. Nothing speaks more directly to the notion of collaboration that we've been celebrating at this biennial than singing together in harmony, simple parts combining to make a beautiful fabric. The words are, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha, say that, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha, Venashuva, Chadesh Yamenu Kekedem. Chadesh Yamenu Kekedem. So I'm going to sing the song all the way through, and then we will bring together the beautiful voices of Rabbis Rachel Benjamin and Igor Zinkov, and I will join in as well, along with all of you. Please join in singing this bittersweet, hopeful, and beautiful song. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, Venashuva, Venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yamenu Kekedem. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, Venashuva, Venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yamenu Kekedem. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, Venashuva, Venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yamenu Kekedem.